Carl. We're going to move to the land and property acquisition and the community aspects of this. And before I bring in Greg Smith, I should just tell him that I've had a note that three of his important constituents in Buckingham, in the shape of my mum and two sisters, are watching him with great anticipation. Over to you, Greg.
Thank you, Chairman. And just for transparency for all members of the committee and the witnesses, I feel I should declare that, like a huge proportion of Buckinghamshire residents, I live in a village that is not far from the route of HS2, although my own property is not affected. I do want to stress that. Mr. Thurston, you were right earlier on. I do have very strong views on this, and you and I have corresponded regularly on it. I'd like to start with the immediate concerns that people have, not just in my own constituency, but in Warwickshire particularly as well, surrounding the response of HS2 Limited and your contractors to COVID-19. It is welcome that you have said that you will operate within Public Health England guidelines. However, the reality on the ground is still very different. My office gets multiple reports daily of contractors of HS2 Limited not social distancing, not following the government's guidelines whilst continuing the enabling works in places like Steeple Claydon in my constituency, but in Warwickshire and other sites as well. Why is there a difference between what is coming out of your press office and in correspondence to what my constituents and others are seeing on the ground?
Okay, if I could make, again, quite a few questions, if I can make a number of points. So first and foremost, our primary responsibility is for the safety and well-being of not just the people who work for us, but the people in the sort of communities that are impacted by our work. So that is paramount. Secondly, it's important to note that the sort of guidance from government that we are following is different for construction, is quite different. So as you say, there is very specific Public Health England guidance for maintaining distancing and sort of managing the risk of COVID-19 for construction, and that's on its sort of third iteration. And we are working with colleagues in Bays and the Construction Leadership Council and the sector more broadly to ensure that we understand as that guidance changes. When the lockdown was triggered, we took 2 weeks across all our sites. We've got somewhere in excess of 200 sites right along the phase one route, as you say, many through your own constituent, and certainly through those rural areas where I think these issues have been brought to our attention. And we did a review to make sure that we would only work where we comply with the guidance. And as of today, we're now at about 75% of our sites are open. That's increased from about 65% a couple of weeks ago. So we've been opening up a few more sites where we can be confident that we can comply with the guidelines. But frankly, if we can't comply with the guidelines, we will shut our sites. And we will take a sort of zero tolerance approach with our contractors. Our contractors are ultimately responsible for complying with the guidelines. I've engaged with all of the CEOs of our key contractors. They take this very seriously. So they are equally only prepared to go and work where they can convince themselves that they can put their own operatives, and then the impact of that work to communities where it's compliant with the guidelines. So you have my commitment to make sure we continue to do that. There have been a number of instances where we've seen, and your office amongst others have brought to our attention some instances, and we've got some ongoing investigations. I mean, we would investigate all sort of safety related issues anyway in construction. We treat COVID-19 issues in exactly the same way. So there are a couple of investigations going on. And, I'd continue to encourage you and other MPs on the route to bring to our attention where you feel that we are not maintaining that compliance with those guidelines. But I would just remind you, as I said at the outset, that the guidelines for construction are different to what government advice has given to those people that are not in construction. And I think that we've got a bit of work to do, probably with our engagement team, to help educate local people to make sure that where people are working and trying to sort of continue to do construction activity, they're doing that to mitigate or as best they can minimise the risk of COVID-19.
Thank you for that. Just to briefly follow that up, I do repeat that, and I will continue to send every instance that's reported to me through to you of where those guidelines are being breached. One of the most serious offences was one of the contractors caught on video seemingly deliberately coughing at someone observing operations on that particular enabling work site. You have corresponded with me saying you're taking that seriously. Has that contractor actually been in some way penalised and the particular individual involved removed from his job?
I can't answer that specific question. I know we've investigated that issue, and I can write back to you or the committee to let you know. What I will say, though, is, and we've seen some videos of so-called sort of breaches of guidelines. Actually, we've had quite a lot of issues in actually not yours, but further north constituencies. Some issues with protesters. Those protesters have been responsible for some of those videos. We've had to involve our security. We've seen action by protesters that is anything but complying with the social distancing guidelines that the government have advised. They've put our operatives at risk. We've had to engage security organisations to protect our sites and protect our operatives. In a number of instances, the police have even been called, which frankly is not a great use of the police at this time. So there is there's a mixed picture here of what's going on. And of course, we need to work together to be vigilant to make sure that we're keeping local people safe, we're keeping our operatives safe. And frankly, we have a duty of care to these protesters, but we have seen some behaviour and conduct which has caused us, significant issues around making sure we can protect our sites and protect our workers.
Okay, can we finally on this, because I'm wary of time. One of the things that a lot of people have written to me about, very scared, is the way that HS2 contractors come from all over the country, because they're doing quite specialist jobs to work on sites along the route. Therefore, in people's minds, are potentially spreading COVID-19, are then going into village stores, shops in the villages along the route. And that's actually scaring local people from going into those stores to get their groceries under lockdown and having to make longer journeys into near towns to go to supermarkets. Can you make a commitment that all HS2 contractors should stay on the sites where enabling works are going on and not go into local facilities like village shops?
Well, I can't comment on the specifics, but I need to understand how one of the challenges we've got in keeping our sites open where it's safe to do so is how we then support those sites. And some of those sites are in quite rural areas. I expect all our contractors to comply with the guidelines. Certainly, I'd expect us to make sure that where we can be self-sufficient in terms of welfare and refreshments and in serving the sites of the contractors, I'd expect the contractors to do that. I think if there's specific areas on the route where we're needing to use local facilities, we'll need to work with our contractors to understand how we can make sure that we don't create any undue risk, or frankly, to your point, we're creating anxiety in local areas because we've got people who are working there. But what I will say is that we are being very diligent around making sure that we comply with the PHE guidance. This is government guidance we're following here, and we're doing our utmost to make sure we follow that.
Okay, I just wanted to make the point that people are scared in these communities and they need you to act maybe over and above the guidance to reassure them that your contractors are not putting the public at risk. If we can move on slightly onto property acquisition, can you tell me how many landowners where HS2 Limited in whatever guise has taken over land for enabling works, or indeed now notice of proceed has been given the main build, are still awaiting payment either for the land, property or crop loss compensation?
As of today, I wouldn't have that data to hand. What I do know is that we make all our advance payments. We make all of our 80% or more of our advance payments. We make those within the 3 months, which we're agreed. Where we haven't paid any money, it will probably be because we have there's some sort of point of contention or dispute over that, and there's a process which we have to go through with landowners to agree the valuation of properties. Certainly at the moment under COVID-19, we've suspended a lot of work in our land and property area anyway, because obviously it can be an anxious issue for people, and we certainly don't want to increase that anxiety. So both on our compulsory purchase program and our discretionary schemes, we've sort of taken a pause at this time for reasons you'll understand, and engage on a case-by-case basis about how we deal with those cases so that we don't unduly create more concern for people, recognising it's stressful enough dealing with COVID-19. But I can write to you and the chair for the committee on specifically your question around what's outstanding of the cases we've got live today.
What I'd say on that very briefly is that this isn't just about the current crisis, this isn't about the COVID-19 crisis. There are farmers in my constituency who have had land taken away from them for enabling works over the last 6 months, 8 months, 12 months, where agricultural fields have been taken out of use. That means a hit on their business. Some of them are awaiting six-figure numbers in terms of crop loss compensation from last harvest. And we're not that many months away from this year's harvest, which is another season of crop loss. How can it be that people's businesses, their livelihoods that are being disrupted by this project, aren't getting their money?
Yeah, and I'd like to take that away and find out and understand the specifics, because there's a clear compensation code that we have to adopt. Often, a lot of that land we take is temporary. I don't the specifics you refer to. I need to confirm back to you. I mean, we take this responsibility seriously. These people didn't choose to live on this route, and obviously our job is to make sure that we deliver the compensation scheme that government set out, so that we give people fair compensation for their land, whether that's to use it permanently as part of the compulsory purchase program, or in fact, in many cases, we use the word temporarily, just as you say, for enabling works to facilitate construction. So, and it's very clear under the scheme when we should pay. There is clear routes for escalation if we can't agree value. Let me come back to you on the specifics of where we would be outstanding and why we'd be outstanding there.
I welcome that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Minister, we've managed to beg another 10 minutes, which I hope works for you as well, because we want to stay on that theme, go to land and acquisition with Greg Smith.
Good morning, Minister. We've corresponded on this a lot, and I want to put on record my thanks for your excellent responsiveness since you took up the role to me. One of the things that when the green light was given for notice to proceed last week was made clear by the government was that we would go into the detailed design phase. And obviously that massively impacts people who are expecting to lose land, have already lost land. We've corresponded in the past about the example of Rosehill Farm in Steeple Claydon, where the landowner even offered to pay for a different route and design of that particular bridge. As we go into this detailed design phase, will there actually be an ability for local communities to change elements of the design, or are we going to come up time and time again, as we did with the Wendover Mine Tunnel, that because it's not in the bill, we can't actually change it, rendering the detailed design actually just a technicality?
Well, there's various things that are very specified in the bill. There's things that we can't change, but there are other things that we can change. And I'm keen to work with communities, as the Prime Minister said clearly to Parliament and to me when I was appointed, that we need to improve how communities are treated. And I level with you, some of the cases you have shown me and some other line of route constituency MPs have shown me are frankly not good enough. In some cases, they've been appalling. And, I have raised them with HS2 Limited. I'm still going back and forth on many. But I share a lot of the concerns of line of route MPs. I share a lot of the concerns expressed by the Residents Commissioner. And sadly, because of the COVID-19 outbreak, I haven't been able to visit many of the constituencies on the line of route. That was very much my intention. I spent February and March kind of ticking off the East Midlands and Leeds, Manchester and Crewe, Birmingham. But then I hope to spend very much March and April out on line of route, engaging with you and your local communities. Sadly, that hasn't come to fruition, but I'm very keen to ensure that I do that going forward, because some of these issues I won't really understand until I get to see them up close on the ground.
Thank you very much for that. And I do look forward to welcoming you to Buckinghamshire as soon as this crisis is over and we can travel once more. Can I just explore one linked thing, though, to the timing of the notice to proceed being given? Within the business case to HS2, it was said that the government had concluded there was value in all but the most extreme cases. if COVID-19 isn't an extreme case, what is? And what assessment has the department made as to actually the likely changes in working patterns, given that we've all spent 4, 5, 6 weeks working at home, doing video conferences like this, on actually the need to proceed? And shouldn't we just pause for a little bit to see how post-COVID-19 Britain and the economy looks before ploughing ahead with these designs and carrying on the works that we've talked about?
I think it's a very fair point, and obviously rapid developments and the uncertain outcome, still to this day, of COVID-19 means that it wasn't possible to undertake a detailed analysis to determine potential longer-term impacts on passenger demand within the phase one business case. But what I would say is, video conferencing has been available since the 1970s, and prior to COVID-19, we've never been more connected as a society. All of us will work routinely at home on an evening from our smartphones before this crisis happened. And yet, despite that, over the past 25 years, we have consistently seen roughly, it's slightly less than 5%, but consistent growth in demand for the West Coast Main Line. We've also seen, across the world, urbanisation with more and more people wanting to live and work in the major cities. I can't fundamentally see that changing. And even if you look in parts of the world where were very adversely affected by, say, HIV and AIDS or the Zika virus or the SARS outbreak, there was a very significant short-term impact in demand for things like rail travel. But then that desire for people still to live in the big cities returned in those countries. And I think in the UK, the move of the population to cities, the urbanisation of the country will continue, and therefore a scheme to link up the major population centres of the country will still, in the long term, hold good sway. So therefore, I think the strategic case for HS2 very much still holds sway. I'm convinced by that, but I completely get we need to keep these things under review. We need to look at the developing analysis, and we need to keep Parliament informed